If you haven't liked or subscribed,
You're going to be joking me.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Fans View Podcast. I'm your host, Jarrett, as usual. And this week, we're going to do a little something special. I told you guys this is a fan-driven podcast, and I am no bigger fan of anything than college football. So naturally, this whole intro is going to be college football-centric. You're going to get my full college football season preview next week, where I'm going to have my buddy Will Blackley on. We're going to talk every conference, the big games coming up, new faces, new places, all that jazz. But this week I thought I'd bring Will in before we throw it to the interview of the week. I figured I'd bring Will in and we were going to talk a little bit of week 0. There's not a whole lot going on. Florida State, Georgia Tech is really, it's the marquee game being played in Ireland. It's really the only game of any real significance unless you're a degenerate. Which, luckily for all the listeners today, Will is a degenerate, so he's got a bet for something other than the main game. As usual, thank you guys for supporting. Thanks for listening. Thanks for checking out the YouTube at the Fans View Podcast, TikTok at the Fans View Podcast, my personal Twitter, my personal Instagram, both at Jurratt, Jurratt. And we'll get to Lodi in just a second, but like I said, I want to bring somebody in, good friend of mine, degenerate gambler, angriest man I know, Will Blackley. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk a little week 0 college football. Will, how you doing, brother? I know that's right. So this is just going to be a brief intro. Like I told everybody, we're going to do our full-blown preview on next week's podcast, and that's going to be also available on the Fans View Podcast YouTube. But for now, week 0, man, we're getting a little taste, just a little. They're going to wet our beak this weekend. What has caught your eye, if anything, for week 0? Beautiful.
Yeah, I was going to take this 100%. I would either use it for the Florida State money line of 450 to knock it down to about 220 and max out wherever the boost is, or I would, because everybody's account, but my account is kind of limited, so I can only bet 25 on the boost. Other people I know can get up to like 65 or 70 bucks. So if you got 65 or 70 bucks, just use it and take Florida State money line because they should beat Georgia Tech. But if you want something a little more profitable or possibly I would also probably take the 10.5 with Georgia Tech.
Right, which is what it's at now. I think if you got this number when it opened, I believe it was like 11.5.
I think it's gonna went 12.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's 10.5 now. I only know that because I bet it today. Let's just get into the nuts and bolts of it. You're going to hear on my ACC preview that I think Florida State is in for a long year. I don't think they're nearly as good as they were last year. And to be fair, I think they were overrated last year. Here's a little personal vitriol. They have a quarterback that has proven absolutely nothing. He didn't do it at Clemson. He didn't do it at Oregon State, but yet he's gonna do it at Florida State somehow. Riddle me that. You got me there. I think Georgia Tech is very underrated. I don't see how they don't cover this number of 10.5.
Well, I don't hate DJ as bad as you do. Obviously, because he ran Clemson season when he was there. He didn't play extremely terrible last year for Oregon State. I mean, he did okay for what he was asked. They were in a pro style, pretty much running offense, so he didn't have to do as much as he sort of had to do in Clemson or Clemson asked him to do. But just like you, I also think that Georgia Tech is severely underrated. Has one of the best rushing attacks in the league. Jamal Haynes, I won't say he's the best because I think Jamie Martinez is, but he's probably the second best running back in the ACC. I have a few more things to say on the college football preview about Georgia Tech, and I have a bet that I really love with Georgia Tech for season long. But as far as this game goes, I don't think it's going to be a blowout like most people do. I don't really like the over because it's the first game of the year, and DJ
Not to
is
mention the travel.
DJ hasn't played with his team. I don't know how accumulated he's going to be with this offense. Florida State has pretty much their whole offense, like offensive line, running backs, everybody's returning. They did lose a couple receivers. They lost Johnny Wilson, but I mean it's Florida State. There's going to be a 5-star out of the woodwork somewhere, or they're going to transfer somebody in to replace them. So I don't see them having a problem beating Georgia Tech, but I kind of think Georgia Tech, if nothing else, will get the backdoor cover. Now,
yeah, I love that.
The other 3 games on this slate, nobody probably even knows anything about these teams. Unfortunately, I do. New Mexico may be the worst team in the entire country as far as Division 1A is concerned. They had probably the worst defense I have ever seen take a football field last year. If you're going to bet that one, I'd probably run with Montana State minus 13.5, or just take them in the first half, which they are.
Let's be honest. If you're betting that game in week 0, you should probably just call 1-800-GAMBLER because you have a problem.
You can take them in the first half minus 6.5. They should easily beat New Mexico in the first half. But my other bet that I really love in week 0 is, speaking of travel, if you haven't, I mean, nobody but me has probably followed this, but Delaware State is going to Hawaii for a road game. Now, Delaware State is a HBCU, and they really have no business being in this. They're just taking a payday, going to Hawaii, free vacation. But Delaware State is so cheap that instead of just taking a direct flight from Baltimore or taking a connection from Baltimore, they decided that they were going to be big time it and take a direct flight to JFK. They left too late on their charter bus, got stuck in New York traffic, and as luck would have it, they didn't arrive until about 2 days before the game, instead of arriving on Wednesday for a Saturday game in Hawaii, which is, by the way, like a 8-hour flight one way. So I don't see any way Delaware State covers this 40 points. I wish you would. If you really wanted to bet it, you should have got it when it was like 36, because it's already went up 4 points since all this happened. But yeah, there's no way that Delaware State is going to be in this game at all. If nothing else tells you that, the over 7.5 points for Delaware State is still sitting at plus money.
Beautiful.
So
I love that.
Vegas doesn't even think that Delaware State is going to score 7.5 points.
You're such a degenerate. I love that you have all this. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Over 42.5 for Hawaii, which is a lot of points for Hawaii, who didn't score more than 36 points in a game last year, if I'm correct, is minus 260. So Hawaii has a bunch of people returning. They run a run and shoot offense, and they can put up 60, 70 points. So it would not shock me at all to see Delaware State lose this game somewhere in the neighborhood of 63-6, or 63-3, or 72-0.
All right, so gun to your head, I guess, in the interest of brevity. Gun to your head, which we wouldn't condone because we do support. What's the word I'm looking for? Don't be a jackass. Gamble responsibly. That's what I'm looking for. Responsible gambling. Gun to your head, though. One pick. What's your favorite pick this week for week 0?
Hawaii minus 40 points.
Lock it up, people. If this degenerate is giving you Hawaii minus 40, I'm going to go ahead and take it as soon as we get off this stream. Well, with that, Will, I want to thank you, brother. I know you're going to be back next week. We're going to run through all the major conferences and talk some college football. I'm pretty excited for that. Appreciate you stopping by for just a minute, though, to talk with us.
No problem. Best time of the year, football season.
As for the listeners, like I told you guys at the start, I appreciate every single one of you for listening, for watching, for interacting. Right now, I'm going to throw it to a very fun interview I did with, I would call him a legend. He was a staple of WCW in the mid to late 90s. He was one of the founding members of Raven's Flock. I'm going to toss it to my interview with Lodi. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Fans View podcast. This week, I am very excited to welcome on, and this is going to be a long intro, people, so bear with me. He is a former WCW superstar, a current professional wrestler on the independent circuit. He's a published author. He's a personal trainer. He's a wrestling trainer. He's a wrestling trainer as well, actually, at Team Fearless Wrestling Academy and Your Flex Appeal, located in Matthews, North Carolina. He is the man, the myth, the legend, Brad Kane, but you know him as Lodi. How are you doing, brother?
Hey, man, I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. Good to see your face again, bro.
Yeah, man, you are officially my first recurring guest.
Hey, fantastic. I'll take it. That
The
is
Lodi
awesome.
Monster is the first repeater.
Hey, the first repeater, and I'm looking at your shirt, man. Your Tigers 14th in the AP poll.
Let's go, baby. As long as we're number one in the last one, we're good to go.
What do you think? Those boys gonna be all right this year?
Man, I think it's going to be better than it was last year, and that's all I can ask for at this point.
Improvement. There you go.
I'm spoiled. We've had Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson. I've been so spoiled the past couple of years, so I gotta tamp those expectations.
You turned some studs out from down there in Death Valley.
That's right. Brad, I'm just gonna jump right into it, man.
Yes, sir.
If I told Brad Kane in 1998, hey man, you're wrestling next week. By the way, it's August 2024. What do you think he would have said to me?
No way. And I'll tell you why. If you told me in 98 I'd still be wrestling in 24, I will throw Cash Wheeler's name in on this. I met Cash when he was 17 or 18 at an indie show in North Carolina in 2004. And so that would be 6 years after the question you were asking. But I told him I was definitely retired. The first day I met him, I told him I was definitely retired by the time I was 35. He hadn't let me live that down. I turned 54 next month, so I'm about 20 years past my retirement date. So if you'd asked me in 98, there's no way I would say I would still be wrestling in 2024. But I am very thankful and blessed that my body, through what it's been through, has allowed me to still hang on and be able to go out and perform. And like this past weekend, I had an opportunity to not only wrestle in Augusta, Georgia for Viral Pro against a great competitor, TJ Boss. Had a great match with him, had a great crowd there. Joe Hendry was on the show, and Joe Hendry packed the house for Viral Pro. John Schuyler was there. AJ from NWA was there. Good card, good outing. And then the next day I was in High Point, North Carolina, wrestling against Ricky Morton and his son. And I stood in for Caprice Coleman, who was supposed to be tagging with his son. Both friends of mine. I've known Caprice for probably 24, 25 years. And they were booked to wrestle, but Caprice got called in to go do a Ring of Honor show. So I was sitting in the ring with Chase, his son, who was 19. And I looked up after we'd done our entrance, and Ricky came out. And I said, Chase, you're 19, right? And he's like, yeah, why, Lodi? I'm like, I've been wrestling Ricky Morton for 28 years. So, quite a life I've led. And when I say blessed and honored and all those good things, the good Lord has looked after me. And I have definitely lived what's called a blessed and charmed life, man. Growing up as a young kid, going to the Greensboro Coliseum here in the Carolinas and watching the Rock and Roll Express with Ricky Morton and Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant, who was there on Sunday, and Nikita Koloff and Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, all these guys that I grew up watching. The fact that I only became co-workers with these guys, but friends with them later on in life, I'm definitely blessed.
That's so great to hear, man. And you said something about your body holding up for you. We had a time there where it was a little sketchy. I just want to get this out of the way. Can
Yes,
we
sir.
talk about the heart attack?
Yeah, we can. And I talk about it sometimes. I realize now, a year past my heart attack and quintuple bypass surgery, it almost sounds like I'm being nonchalant about it, and I'm not. I don't want anybody to ever think that I'm downplaying it. I also don't want to go the other route and put it over too much. But, went into the hospital, drove myself to the hospital, had a heart attack in the ring, wrestling Lucky Ali, who's a good friend and now with WWE, and knew something wasn't right and ended up in a hospital in Charlotte here at home. And after a couple of days of tests, finally did a heart cath because they couldn't really find out what was going on. I've had an enlarged heart. We knew that for a long time, but that hasn't killed me yet, and that wasn't the issue. But after doing a heart cath, they found 3 blockages in the 3 arteries that go to your heart. They carry blood there. One was blocked at 90%, and the other 2 were blocked at 100. And so it's pretty important for your heart to get blood. And when the doctor he put a diagram up on the wall and said, "Kid, here's what you're looking at." He said there are 3 arteries carrying blood there. 2 of them are blocked at 100%, and the third one, which they call the Widowmaker, was blocked at 90. And I was blessed that one was only blocked at 90. So my heart's getting a small fraction of the blood it's supposed to. And after the heart attack, we ended up going into surgery. And in the surgery, they find 2 more blockages. So I end up having a quintuple bypass, which is 5. And I say that, and sometimes today it still catches me when I say it. I'm like, last summer I had a quintuple bypass in June, and I got back in the ring December 8th.
Wow.
God loves me a lot, man. So
yes, sir.
I'm very blessed, and again, I'm very thankful for that. I don't take it nonchalant. I don't joke about it in a way that, I'm not realizing how serious it was. But I did an interview recently with Fox here in Charlotte, and one of the ladies was asking me, she's like, "Don't you think your friends and family probably think it's time for you to maybe hang it up with all these injuries?" It's like, it's kind of a sign. And I'm like, well, on my side of it, God brought me back. So maybe that was my side to keep going. So it's
That's
because,
right.
again, you know this, and I've talked about it before, but I do use my wrestling now as my ministry as well. So I have a chance to talk to kids. And where on TV for years, I was always a heel and a bad guy and came out with a sign, "We hate this town," those kind of things. And now I get to carry Bible verses on my signs. So the Lodi persona and personality has changed some, and it's different than what you saw on TV. But there's still some of the old goofy character that I portray at WCW for sure.
I love that, man. And let's talk about WCW.
Yeah.
Obviously, you debuted at World War III '97.
Yes, sir.
Can you recall what that day was like? Like, what were the nerves like? If you can go back that far.
I can. It and I got to back up and tell a little bit of the story before that because it truly came out of nowhere. What I mean by that is I was down at the power plant. I went through the power plant training, the tryouts, got in, moved to Atlanta. I had already wrestled for a year and a half on the Indies before I ever went down there, so I already knew how to wrestle. They were doing a good job of cleaning up my in-ring stuff and teaching more about psychology under Pez Watley and that kind of thing. But I was working with Raven as his personal trainer and his personal assistant. And while I had done a couple of enhancement jobs for WCW down in Florida for the WCW Pro Show down at Universal Studios, I had not wrestled on TV with him yet. And Raven and I were sitting in a bar one night, and he was upset with me. At that time, WCW wasn't doing a lot of house shows. Raven was home on the weekends, and I was gone every weekend doing indie shows. I was in North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, wherever, and would come back to Atlanta during the week. And Raven would be gone for Nitro and the pay-per-view once a month. And he was joking. Stevie had just gotten hurt, Richards, and the Flock, and he's like, "Man, I sure wish you were on TV with me." And I was like, "Yeah, I wish I was on TV with you too." Now this, mind you, is a Thursday night, about 11:30, 12 o'clock, and we're sitting in a bar. And he said, let me make a phone call. And he calls Terry Taylor. And he's talking to Terry. He's like, hey, Brad Kane down at the power plant. What do you think about putting him in the flock on Monday at Nitro? And I'm just hearing Raven's side of the conversation. Raven's like, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. Okay, my bad. Cool. Thanks anyway. All right, cool. And he hangs up, and I'm like, well, that didn't sound too good. He goes, well, actually, it is. I was going to put you in the flock on Monday at Nitro. I forgot we have a pay-per-view Sunday. He said, we're flying out Saturday morning for the pay-per-view. Now, this is Thursday night at midnight, and I've got dark hair and, no idea about being Billy Idol. And he's like, hey, kid, you don't like a star. And so I told the story a lot, but we end up spending all day Friday dyeing my hair, running around, getting black leather pants, the chains, the glove. And we flew out Saturday morning, So here I am 4 days later, 4 days before the actual pay-per-view. I wasn't booked. I had no intention of being there. So the day of, it's at the Palace at Auburn Hills. And being a kid growing up watching sports, of course, I watch the Detroit Pistons and the Bulls play there,
Yep.
And it's like here I go up and sit up in the stands, and I think it held 18,000 or so people, and we're going to have 10 million people watching on TV. And I remember just sitting up in the stands and watching as they're setting everything up, and I'm like, this place is going to be full of people pretty soon. I never wrestled in front of a crowd that large, obviously. And so it was a lot of pressure, even though I wasn't wrestling. I was just coming out with the flock. We were doing a thing with Riggs, and that was it. But still, as a kid, being a wrestling fan, and here I am at 27 years old and getting ready to walk out on a pay-per-view. It was a pretty cool experience. It was a pretty cool day, and I actually do remember a lot of it. I spent a lot of time by myself,
Yeah.
walking around and just trying to not be overwhelmed with what I was dealing with. So it was a great experience.
All right, so it's been 27. 27? Oh my God, it's been 27 years.
Good with the math, bro. Yeah.
Woo. We could peel back the curtain a little bit.
Hey, you know what? I can say this, and I'm actually thankful for it. As we pull back the curtain, I've never had to hide under the ring. Not once. And I've heard all the stories from the guys that got stuck under there for so long or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, I'm
Being in
good,
bottles,
man.
yeah.
If I never have to do that, I'm gonna be just fine. My wrestling career is okay if I never have to hide under a ring for 4 hours.
And you know what? You're one of the first WCW guys of that era that I've had the chance to speak to. And since we're on World War III, it was always a personal favorite of mine. As a kid, man, that 3-ring battle royal looked awesome. As a grown man, and now looking at it and talking to workers, that had to be a logistics nightmare.
It was later on now in my life, obviously, doing indie shows and stuff. I get out of every battle royal I can. I'm not doing a battle royal because from a fan standpoint, I remember being a kid and going and watching the Bunkhouse Stampede on tour. Because
Right.
I'm a little older than you, but when Dusty brought the Bunkhouse Stampede and they were traveling and all those guys in the ring in boots and jeans and just beating each other up, dude, that's cool. But as a performer, that's just not a lot of fun because you got to kind of have your head on a swivel, because you don't know, like at that level, everybody's a little better off. Is like taking at the level of WCW, it wasn't quite as hectic and crazy as it is doing a battle royal on the indie scene. You got some young guys
Right.
on indie scenes trying to get in all these spots and do all this stuff. Like, get me out of here! I don't want to do that. But the coolest thing happened. I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. Lenny and I reconnected for a WrestleCade event up in Winston Salem, and we were going to make an appearance, and they actually came to us that day. And they're like, hey, everybody's coming out to the Battle Royal to generic music. Can we finish it with you and Lenny being the last to the ring and you guys actually get your entrance? And we're like, yeah. I mean, like, okay, well, why wouldn't we take that? So we did the whole It's Raining Men thing. We came out, and everybody else are on the ring. But here was the kicker. They're like, so Jeff Farmer and Scott Norton are here from the NWO. And Norton was getting ready to have hip surgery, couldn't get in the ring. They're like, is it okay with you guys if like 5-10 minutes in, they hit their music, they come down, they specifically asked, can they pull you guys under the bottom rope and you guys just fight to the back? And I'm like, I get my full entrance. I get jumped by the NWO. I don't have to go to the top rope. I get to fight, Jeff Farmer and Scott Norton to the back. Yeah, we'll do that. I mean, it's like, okay, you can't give me a better, because the thing is now, just like, I never got eliminated. I went under the bottom rope. Like, I can
Right.
still win that battle royal, so yeah.
We're gonna talk
So
to Tracy when we get off this call. You might be the winner.
yeah, Lenny or I won because we never the NWO never got in. Lenny and I never got eliminated. They pulled
That's
us under the
right.
bottom rope,
That's
but
right.
it was great. Norton and Farmer are awesome guys, and again, just to have them asked to work with us and do something with us, because Norton was having some hip issues, was pretty cool.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So, in our first interview, I asked you what your favorite moment was in WCW. You were quick to it. You said '98 Fall Brawl.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, that was the end of the flock. That was the flock being disbanded.
Right.
What are some of your what are some of the high points? What are some of your favorite memories of the flock as a whole? I mean, obviously, it was very edgy for its time period.
Right.
Just what were your thoughts in general about the flock?
As over as I felt like we were, I felt like we were probably too over for Hogan and the NWO's liking, and that was probably part of our demise. I think Hogan wanted one bad guy group, not two. And I will
Yep.
never forget, we were standing at Gorilla one night, and Hogan and Bischoff were behind us. They were following us up with a segment. And it sounds better coming from Riggs and Sig Boy and some of those guys. But so many nights when we walked out, whether we came down through the crowd or walked out from the back, you've got the whole flock. You got 8, 9, 10 guys. And 90% of the time, the whole building would start chanting. And it wasn't Ravens flock sucks. It was 90% of the time, Lodi sucks. I was the guy everybody loved to hate. I was like, the Eddie Haskell of the group and the cheerleader. And they really zeroed in on me. And I'll never forget, we came back one night through the curtain, and Hogan and Bischoff were standing there. And Hogan made some comment about being over or something because the fans were chanting Lodi sucks out of our whole group. And Saturn's like, yep, Hogan and Bischoff noticed. We're done pretty soon, kid. Thanks. It was one of those things. And so that was kind of funny. The camaraderie we had was something that, we spent a lot of time together, and I think came across in some of the angles and some of the stuff we did on TV. I feel like there were a couple of guys who shall remain nameless. Raven, everybody's heard, is a genius in the wrestling business or whatever, but he had a distinct vision for each one of the flock members, what he wanted. And some of the guys, like Kidman, and I think like myself, and Saturn to a degree, went all in on Raven's vision. And some of the other guys, if they would have went all the way with what Raven was asking them to do, I think everybody could have gotten over even more, and we've been over more as a whole. Riggs and even Sid Boy, who I talked to 2 days ago and loved to death. Wrestling, you got these egos. Everybody wants to be the cool guy. Well, there's Raven. It's Raven's flock.
Yeah.
We are cannon fodder.
Exactly.
We're a supporting cast. And Raven and I had an argument on more than one occasion when I would kind of butt heads on what he wanted to do with me and what I wanted to do. And he's like, you can go be on your own if you want. How do you think that's going to work? I'm like, yes, sir, boss. What you say was going to go. I mean, I wasn't dumb. I knew where my bread was buttered, right? And so it's one of those things.
Right.
I had a distinct role to play. And again, I will take some blame in that too. When I say the guys could have gotten over more, there were probably 20 to 30% ideas Raven wanted to do with my character that even I shot down. Because sometimes Raven can't make you see the vision that he wants, but when you go all in on it, it gets over 10 times more than you ever thought it would because he was smart.
Right.
So,
do you have a pick, if I put you on the spot, who you think maybe was maybe underrated wouldn't be the right word, but maybe the most underappreciated flock member?
I can tell you right now, even for all the accolades he got, and I've stuck by this forever, and I will continue on with this question. Kidman was insanely great. I never had like when the flock broke up, I never had a bad match with Kidman. Kidman gave me a concussion with a shooting star press. He landed his knee in my eye socket in Madison, Wisconsin one night on a Saturday night taping. But it's wrestling. Things happen. It's your friend.
That's right.
I don't hold any animosity towards him for doing that. It's a crazy move, and sometimes things go wrong. Sick Boy was athletically gifted beyond what people saw him be able to do. He and I still work together occasionally on some indie shows, and it blows my kids' minds when he comes to wrestling school just to fill in for a night, and they see how big he is, and
Yeah.
when they see how agile he is and how he can move, he moves great for a big man. I mean, I actually, we talk about my ministry and being a pastor and speaking and that kind of stuff. I performed Sick Boy's wedding last year to his wife.
Oh, wow.
And, Sick Boy carries 285, 290 these days and carries it well at 6'5". I mean, but he still wrestles. He can run up to the top rope and stand there and springboard and do everything he used to. So it's pretty amazing to see a guy that size move like that. And so I think he was underappreciated, but he never really got the chance to show all the stuff he can do. So he was
Right.
there, but
I love that answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I love that answer. I'm such a Billy Kidman fan, so that you saying that just makes my day.
He was fantastic, and he was so great to work with. And you go back and watch some of our matches, there were a couple spots I can vividly in my mind. I know I screwed up, I messed up, and Kidman cleans them up so well that nobody else would know. Or if you saw it even as a
Right.
smart fan, you're like, okay, Lodi messed up, but Kidman smoothed that over like nothing ever happened. And I was so green back then. I jokingly say I was so green I was still blue and yellow.
So I've got a couple more questions for you. Just real quick. The West Hollywood Blondes, you talked about your relationship still with Lenny.
Yeah.
I know you're a very religious man. Like you said, you use wrestling for your ministry. What were your initial thoughts when they brought that idea to you?
Okay, so you don't know the story. Well, to clear everything up so you understand the story, nobody brought that idea to us. We took that to the office. And I can give it to you in 30 seconds or less. After the flock was over, I was doing a random job here on Nitro or Thunder, doing all the Saturday night tapings. Now, because I've worked down at the power plant with Terry Taylor was booking some of the Saturday night shows. He came up with a little gimmick for me I was doing called the loaded glove. So I'd come out, my Lodi attire, but I was by myself. The flock was disbanded. And do a whole match. Basically, I'm getting killed, sneak over the corner, pull a gimmick out of my shorts, stick it in the glove, bam, knock the guy out, And we were running with that on the Saturday night show. But outside of that, I really didn't have a lot going on. And Lenny approached me at a taping one time and said, "Hey, Lodi, what are they doing with you now?" And I'm like, "Not really a lot of anything." And I had just known Lenny from seeing him at TV, like, "Hey, Lenny, hey, Lodi." Never had more than a 2-minute conversation with a guy. He said, "Well, what do you think about you and I being a tag team?" And I looked at him. I said, because, Lenny was an enhancement guy. I said, "A tag team?" I'll never forget verbatim. I said, "What are we going to be, Lodi and Lenny the losers?" I mean, where's the appeal with that? And I'm like, great. He's like, no, got an idea. Hear me out. And I'm like, "What's your idea, Lenny?" And he threw the whole idea of Saturday Night Live, the Ambiguous Gay Duo. He said, "What if you and I are walking down the beach eating ice cream? My ice cream falls off, and they're like, 'Hey, Lenny, have some of mine.'" And he goes, and I said, "Lenny, I don't know if WCW is going to go for that, right?" And I'd become close with Kevin Nash, and Kevin was doing the booking. He said, "Bro, you could take that to Nash."
Right.
And I knew Lenny. I didn't think Lenny was being real serious. I said, "Bro, if you type this up, bring it to me. I'll go give it to Nash," knowing there's no way Lenny's going to type up a paper on the West Hollywood Blondes or whatever we were going to become. 2 weeks later at TV, I show up and Lenny comes up with 3 pages typed. He's like, "Lodi, here it is." I'm like, "What?" And I look at it, and the first line says, "This is not a gay gimmick." And I'm like, "Lenny, bro, I can't take this to the office." And Lenny's like, "Dude, you promised. And I'm like,
"Oh man,
all right, let's go." So we get in the hall where Kevin's office was set up. Like, "Kevin, can I talk to you for a second?" He's like, "Yeah, Lodi, what you got?" I said, "Lenny's got an idea for us," and I hand it to him. He looks at it, bro, and he goes, "This is not a gay." What? Get out of here! Like, he throws out the office. He throws it up in the air, and I look at Lenny. I'm like, "Are you happy?" And we walk down the hall, and I'm like, "Lenny, that was stupid." And he's like, dude, you promised you'd do it. Thank you. I appreciate you doing that. So 6 weeks go by, nothing. I was living in LA at the time. I actually was living in West Hollywood. I'd moved to California to do some acting. And I got a call from my good buddy Ross Foreman, who was the editor of the magazine and now does promotions for TNA. And he said, "Hey, what's going on?" I said, "I'm in a meeting with my manager." He goes, "You're going to get a phone call in about 5 minutes from Kevin Nash. They're going to run with that gimmick." And I'm like, "What?" And he hung up. He hung up on me. And so 5 minutes later, my phone rings, and it was Nash. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing next Monday?" I'm like, "I don't know. You got anything for me?" He said, "Why don't you come to TV and let's run with that gimmick with you and Lenny?" And that's how it started.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so that thing, I got to talk about this for a second because I told you, Lenny and I didn't know each other very well. So
Right.
here we go into this angle as a tag team, and we're drawing great ratings because as wrestlers, we get the quarter-hour breakdowns. You knew exactly what your quarter hour did each week on TV. You knew if you were over or not. And WCW at this
Right.
time, our numbers were starting to tank. And Lenny and I, for our quarter hours, we never had less than a 4-4 or 4-5. And our show at this time was already down in the threes. Hogan and Bischoff were doing like 1-5s and 1-6s. But we were killing it.
Wow.
And Lenny and I end up being tag team partners, traveling together, working out together, spending that much time together. We became really, really good friends and just had so much in common. I feel like our TV chemistry was there because of the relationship we kind of developed just as friends overall. And we a lot of the stuff we did on TV, some of it was planned, and a lot of it was absolutely on the fly. And so we're very, very just played off each other very well. And I've never had chemistry with another tag team partner like the two of us did.
That is fantastic. I'm so glad I got to hear that story. I don't know how I didn't know that before. Wow.
Yeah, that was actually Lenny.
Um.
Yeah, that was Lenny's idea.
Wow. Wow. To I don't want to end this on a somber note, so I'm gonna go with this question, and then we're gonna take it happy, and
Shoot.
we're gonna bring it home after that. You had a
All right.
period, I think it was during your WCW days, where you struggled with GHB and painkillers and stuff like that.
Yes,
When
sir.
did you know, you had a problem? Maybe when was rock bottom, and what was that kick in the ass that said, I need to get straight, I need to get healthy, I need to get my life together?
There were times at WCW where I knew I had gone off the deep end. I didn't have a drug issue when I went to WCW, and I'm not blaming anybody else but myself for developing one. But I got to a point where I was so addicted to the drugs, I couldn't perform. So I had to be high to perform. And that is not something I take lightly or not something I brag about or feel proud of. Um, when I lost my job, I went spiraling down fast and hard and was in a really bad place for a while. And it got to a point where I knew I had to turn my life around. And I had tried multiple times getting clean, getting sober, and I ended up going to rehab. And at the point, because I lost my job, I couldn't afford a 28-day like go away rehab. And so I did an outpatient facility where I went and checked in every morning, spent the day there, and left in the evening and came back the next day. And started to read my Bible again and started to pray a little bit, and slowly but surely was able to kick the drugs. And I'm happy that that came up today actually, because I know for a fact without God I couldn't have gotten sober. But the bad thing of that was when I got sober and got away from the drugs, I began to drink a lot more and basically just cross addicted. And although the drugs could kill me at any moment, in my mind, the drinking wasn't as bad because it would be a long-term death and drinking killed me. But in August 23rd, which is just a week away, of 2009, I had my last drink. So I'm coming up on 15 years clean and sober next week. So, uh,
Heck yeah, man. I'm so glad to hear that.
me too. And
Congratulations.
thank you. It's
Congratulations.
for an addict. I laugh about that some now. When you take about like when did I know it was bad? When you're taking 40 pain pills a day, you know that's not normal. It's just not.
Yeah.
And I don't say that in a
Yeah.
bragging way. I knew guys who took a lot more. I've heard Kurt Angle talk about taking more. I know guys personally that I spent time with who took even more. And to say that as a sober adult to people who've never had a drug problem, that you took 40 pain pills a day on a daily basis, day in and day out, that's embarrassing. It is. It's not. It's not
Yeah.
something I'm proud of. And again, I know people who died who took a lot less. So God kept me here for a
Yeah.
reason. And I feel like one of the main reasons God allowed me to live with that story is so I can help some of these young kids that I train now who may have the opportunity to go wrestle at that level and make that kind of money and not make those same kind of stupid mistakes I did and not end up dead and live a productive life.
That's a hell of an answer. Like I said, congratulations on your sobriety.
Thank
It's not
you.
easy. I know. I've had addicts in my family, so I know it's not an easy road.
Thank you.
But to end this on a happy note,
Okay.
I wanted to just touch on very briefly. You're an author too. You're a published author. What
Yeah.
led to you writing a book?
I'm an avid reader. I was a political science major in college, so I used to read a lot, and I picked up reading. As a young age, I've always read. And one of my favorite authors is Tom Clancy, and he and John Grisham was one of my favorite authors. And I read one time John Grisham was obviously a lawyer, and he said, his first book was A Time to Kill. It's one of my favorite books I've read. He never set out to be an author. He always thought it would be cool to have a stack of papers in his office, in his law office there. People like, hey, what's that? He goes, I wrote a book one time. And so my life before I got into wrestling was very much centered around bodybuilding. I had a personal training studio, and I was a competitive bodybuilder. And so I wrote a book about a competitive bodybuilder. I really never expected to get it published, and I got it published back in 2004. I don't push it as much anymore as I did. I'm not really proud of the language in it. Again, it was before I got my relationship with the Lord straightened out, and the language in it is horrific, although it is very common to meathead wrestling and meathead wrestlers and their verbiage that they would
Yeah.
use. It's not the type of language I use anymore, so I'm not really proud of the language that's in it. And my editor even got on me about that. She's like, you might want to. I understand it's realistic, but you might want to cut back on some of that. And I was adamant about keeping it in. And in hindsight, it's there, it's done. I actually want to, before I end up my wrestling career, obviously write a story on my wrestling, just a biography and cover, because I think there are a lot of things I've done that I hope can, again, like I said, help other people avoid some of the pitfalls that I've gone through and be able to recover from.
Right. All right, let's bring this thing home on a happy note. I got two more questions
Yeah.
for you. One, what are you a fan of? What are you a fan of? This is the Fans View podcast, so I have to ask. What are you a fan of outside of the wrestling ring?
Outside the wrestling ring, obviously my relationship with the Lord is first and foremost in my life, and that is the most important thing to me. Because again, it wasn't for Him, I would have been gone a long, long, long time ago. I wouldn't even be here. We couldn't even have this conversation. So I got to say that's first. Second, I love spending time at the beach. I lived there for a while. I've lived on the East Coast and the West Coast, and now I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, not really near the beach, but I want to retire back there one day. And I do read a lot, and I spend a lot of time in the gym. People, obviously wrestling, my body is part of that. I've got to maintain a certain physique to maintain the wrestling look, but I'm also a personal trainer. And so I've got to kind of walk the walk and look the look. And I love it. Last summer, when I couldn't work out because of my broken sternum after my heart surgery, um, I think those are the most miserable times of my life is when I can't go to the gym and get a workout in. It's not so much for the outward appearance as it is the inner, the peace I find working out. So,
Right.
yeah, I'm a meathead at heart.
And finally, the last question I have, and I have to ask this to everyone. In 2024, what does success mean to Brad Kane?
Success to Brad Kane. Keeping Jesus first in everything I do and pointing people to Him with my actions and my words. And heaven forbid that I ever do anything that pushes people away from that. That's first and foremost, again. And that there's nothing else that comes close. I do know that with my wrestling, career personally, I've got a lot more days behind me than I do ahead. I've got to start facing that reality at some point. But the other place I find success is in my wrestling school and bringing along some of these young kids, passing on the knowledge that I was given to by some of the greatest minds in the wrestling business, and watching these young kids become successful. And as I tell all of them, my goal with them, I want all of them to be wildly more successful than I ever was. But to see them get out and start to work and wrestle and have a career, that's always makes me feel like I've accomplished something there.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for your time. You've been very gracious with it. We've even went a couple minutes over than we planned on.
No worries, we're good,
You're a
man.
legend. We appreciate you as fans, as a wrestling fan. I know you've been a big part of my wrestling fandom.
Yeah.
You and the flock. So I just want to say thank you so much, and hopefully we have you on. Maybe you'll be the first 3-time guest.
Three time. We could do it.
That's right. We'll put Booker out of a job. We'll have you on 6 times. How about that?
That's it. See you, Book. That's it. I'll take Book's job.
That's right. Thank you so much, Brad. And where can people get a hold of you? Where can people reach you if they want to do chat it up with Lodi?
Yeah, my social media, my Instagram and my Twitter, Lodi1Brad, Lodi, the number 1, BRAD. Of course, I'm on Facebook under Brad Lodi Kane. You can find me there. It's pretty easy to find me on most of the social media. So hit me up there, and I keep my schedule up there where I'm going to be wrestling, that kind of thing. So if you get a chance, come out and see the Lodi Monster.
That's right. Well, thank you, Brad. We appreciate your time, and everybody else, I'll see you guys next week on the Fans View.